Laughter echoed in the humid summer air, a sound way too loud for the dead of night. Chloe, her white bride-to-be sash askew, giggled and pointed toward the chain-link fence. "Are you guys chickening out?" she slurred, her voice a playful challenge. Her four best friends, Maya the sensible one, Lena the thrill-seeker, Sarah the romantic, and Becca the quiet observer, exchanged nervous glances. The dare had started as a joke over their third round of cocktails at the bachelorette party. Sneak into the old Ethelred facility, the spooky, abandoned-looking complex on the edge of town. It was supposed to be a quick in and out, a story to tell for years to come. But now, standing before the 10-foot fence topped with barbed wire, the joke felt a lot less funny. The place wasn't just old, it was guarded. Really guarded. Lena, of course, was the first to move. "Never!" she declared, her eyes gleaming with defiant excitement. She grabbed the fence, testing its strength. "Chloe's getting married. We can't let her go into matrimony thinking her friends are a bunch of scaredy cats." Maya sighed, adjusting her glasses. "Lena, this is a federal-looking fence. There are warning signs everywhere. This is a genuinely bad idea." But her words were lost in the rising tide of adrenaline and cheap champagne. The thrill of the forbidden was a powerful magnet, pulling them closer to the dark, silent buildings that loomed beyond the barrier. It felt like the opening scene of a horror movie, and part of them, the reckless, youthful part, was absolutely loving it. The security was surprisingly lax for a place that looked so imposing from a distance. A loose section of the fence, hidden behind an overgrown bush, provided their entry point. They slipped through one by one, their party dresses snagging on thorns and their high heels sinking into the soft earth. The air inside the compound felt different, colder, heavier. A single wide road led towards a monolithic central building, a windowless cube of concrete that seemed to suck the very light from the moon. There were no guards in sight, no roving patrols, no barking dogs, just an unnerving, profound silence that made the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel sound like gunshots. They held hands, a chain of nervous energy, moving deeper into the heart of the mystery. Chloe led the way, her bridal bravado renewed. "See, nothing to it," she whispered, though her voice trembled slightly. They crept along the wall of the main building, searching for a way in. They found it not in a door or a window, but in a large circular metal hatch set flush against the concrete base. It was unlocked. A wave of disbelief washed over them. Why build a fortress and leave the door wide open? It didn't make sense, but the dare was the dare. With a collective heave, the five of them pushed the heavy hatch open, revealing a ramp that descended into pitch-black darkness. The air that wafted out was strange, not musty or stale but sweet, like honeysuckle and ozone after a storm. It was inviting, too inviting. The ramp led them down into a vast, circular chamber. As the heavy hatch swung shut behind them with a deafening metallic boom, a soft light bloomed from the ceiling, illuminating the space. The click of the lock sealing them inside was unmistakable. Panic flared in Maya's chest. "It locked! The door locked!" she cried, rushing back up the ramp and pounding on the cold, unyielding metal. The rest of the group stared, their drunken fun curdling into genuine fear. They were trapped. The room was perfectly round, its walls made of a smooth, pearlescent material that shimmered under the gentle light. In the exact center of the room stood a single, enormous glass enclosure, like a terrarium for a giant. Hesitantly, they approached the enclosure. It was a massive cylinder of what looked like crystal, reaching from the floor to the high ceiling. Inside, there was nothing but a swirling, opalescent mist, a thick fog that danced and churned as if it were alive. It was beautiful and deeply unsettling. There were no visible creatures, no plants, no furniture, just the endless hypnotic dance of the milky vapor. Was this some kind of art installation? A science experiment? Becca, the quiet one, reached out and touched the glass. It was warm, humming with a low, almost imperceptible vibration that traveled up her arm and made her teeth buzz. "What is this place?" she whispered, her voice filled with awe and dread. Their initial terror began to subside, replaced by a strange sense of calm. The sweet smell from before was stronger in here, and the soft light was soothing. It felt safe, almost too safe. Sarah, a hopeless romantic, found herself staring into the mist, her mind drifting. She imagined her dream wedding, the one she'd planned since she was a little girl, with a groom whose face she could never quite picture. As she stared, the mist inside the enclosure seemed to thin, and for a fleeting second, she thought she saw the silhouette of a man in a tuxedo, smiling at her. She blinked, and it was gone. "Did you guys see that?" she asked. But the others were lost in their own worlds, their eyes glazed over as they stared at the swirling fog. The reality of their situation was bizarre. They were locked in a futuristic, sterile room, staring at a giant glass jar of fog. Their phones had no signal. The door was sealed tight. There was no way out. Yet, the panic that should have been consuming them was held at bay by the room's strange, tranquil atmosphere. It was like being in the eye of a hurricane, a pocket of stillness surrounded by a storm of their own making. They were prisoners, but the prison was beautiful. It was a gilded cage, and something deep inside it was starting to hum a tune that only their deepest desires could understand. Lena paced the perimeter, her adventurous spirit now clashing with the stark reality of confinement, but even she felt the pull of the mysterious, calming energy. The transformation began subtly. For Sarah, the romantic, the hazy silhouette in the mist solidified. He stepped forward, right through the glass wall as if it weren't there, and smiled. He was perfect, exactly the man from her daydreams, with kind eyes and a jawline that could cut glass. "Sarah," he said, his voice like velvet, "I've been waiting for you." The world around her melted away, the sterile room replaced by a sun-drenched vineyard. He took her hand, and suddenly she was living in her ultimate fantasy, a whirlwind romance straight out of a movie. She forgot about the locked door, forgot about her friends, forgot everything but the feel of his hand in hers and the impossible, perfect reality she had stepped into. For Lena, the thrill-seeker, the room morphed into the base of a towering, unconquered mountain in the Himalayas. The air grew thin and crisp, and she was decked out in professional climbing gear. A seasoned Sherpa, his face weathered and wise, stood beside her, pointing toward the summit. "The world record awaits," he said with a grin. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with pure, unadulterated excitement. This was her ultimate challenge, the adventure she had always craved. The memory of a bachelorette party dare and a locked concrete room felt like a distant, foggy dream. Her reality was the ice, the wind, and the glorious peak that waited for her to claim it. Chloe, the bride-to-be, found herself not in an adventure, but in a cozy, beautiful home. It was her dream house, the one she had pinned on Pinterest boards for years, with a sprawling garden and a warm, inviting kitchen. Two beautiful, laughing children, her children, ran into her arms, and a handsome, loving man who looked remarkably like her fiancé, but somehow more perfect, kissed her forehead. "Welcome home, honey," he said. The anxiety she secretly harbored about marriage and starting a family evaporated like morning dew. This wasn't a fantasy, it was her life, perfect and complete. The stresses of wedding planning and the fear of the unknown were replaced by a profound and overwhelming sense of peace and belonging. Even Maya, the pragmatist, and Becca, the observer, were swept away. Maya found herself in a state-of-the-art laboratory, on the verge of a scientific breakthrough that would change the world. She was respected, brilliant, and fulfilled, her mind buzzing with complex equations that suddenly made perfect sense. Becca, who always felt invisible, stood on a massive stage, a guitar in her hands, as a crowd of thousands chanted her name. The stage fright that had crippled her for years was gone, replaced by a rock star's confidence. Each woman was living her own private heaven, a world tailored perfectly to her soul's deepest longing. They were separate, yet together, lost in illusions so vivid and all-encompassing that they had become more real than reality itself. Weeks, or maybe months, drifted by in a blissful haze. Time had no meaning in their perfect worlds. But slowly, a thread of awareness began to weave its way through their individual fantasies. It was a feeling at first, a sense of being watched. Sarah, while waltzing with her dream prince under a canopy of stars, would feel a flicker, a momentary glimpse of the pearlescent room and the swirling mist in the glass enclosure. Lena, nearing the summit of her mountain, would hear a low, humming sound beneath the howl of the wind, a vibration that felt both alien and strangely familiar. The perfect worlds began to show tiny, almost imperceptible seams, like cracks in a flawless mirror. The source of their joy began to reveal itself, not as a person or a machine, but as a presence. In their dreams, they started to sense a consciousness within the mist. It communicated not with words, but with feelings, a wave of profound loneliness, a deep yearning for freedom. It showed them images of itself, not as a physical form, but as a being of pure energy, trapped within the glass prison. It projected feelings of gratitude, thanking them for their presence, explaining that their happiness was its food, its sustenance. The creature, they came to understand, was a psychic parasite, but a benevolent one. It fed on their joy, and in return, it gave them the world. The realization was not horrifying, it was poignant. They felt an overwhelming wave of sympathy for this lonely being. It had given them everything they had ever wanted. It had cured their anxieties, fulfilled their ambitions, and loved them in the way they needed to be loved. How could they not feel indebted to it? The creature was their benefactor, their secret friend, a magical entity that had turned a stupid dare into a miraculous gift. The sterile room was not a prison for them, they now believed, but for the creature. And they, the recipients of its boundless generosity, were the only ones who could possibly help it. A new, shared purpose began to form, connecting them across their separate dreamscapes. The creature needed to be free. It was a beautiful, magical being, and it was wrong for it to be held captive in a glass jar. Their individual fantasies now had a common goal woven into them. Sarah's prince spoke of a legendary key that could shatter any prison. Lena's quest up the mountain became a search for a mystical power source to break the enclosure. Chloe's perfect husband whispered to her about a control panel hidden somewhere outside their idyllic home. The puppet master was no longer just feeding them dreams, it was pulling their strings, directing their collective will toward a single unified goal, its own escape. The desire to free their benefactor became an obsession. The fantasies shifted from idyllic escapes to, well, epic quests. They were no longer passive recipients of joy, but active heroes on a noble mission. In her dream, Maya worked tirelessly not on a world-changing cure, but on a complex frequency that could shatter the crystalline prison without harming the delicate, misty creature inside. Becca's concerts turned into benefit shows, her lyrics now powerful anthems about freedom and breaking chains, her music resonating with a strange energy that seemed to weaken the walls of their shared prison. They were united in purpose, their fantasies now a collaborative effort to stage the ultimate jailbreak. They began to test the boundaries of their real environment. In moments of clarity, they would bang on the circular hatch, shouting for help, but not for themselves. "Let it out," Chloe would scream, her voice raw. "It's not dangerous, it's lonely." They would leave messages, scrawled in lipstick on the floor of the pearlescent room, pleading with their unseen captors. They described the beauty of their shared dreams, the kindness of the creature and the injustice of its imprisonment. They saw themselves as crusaders for a magical being, completely convinced of its benevolence. The creature, in turn, rewarded their efforts with even more vivid and intoxicating fantasies, reinforcing their loyalty. This new purpose felt more real and more important than anything they had ever experienced. The outside world, their jobs, their families, their former lives, seemed drab and meaningless in comparison. Why would they ever want to return to a world of compromise and disappointment when they could live in perfection, all while serving a higher, more beautiful cause? The creature was their god, and they were its disciples. They completely trusted the emotions it fed them. The loneliness it projected felt more profound than any sadness they had ever known, and the joy it provided was more intense than any happiness they had ever experienced. Their campaign to free the creature was a dangerous bargain, though they were blind to the terms. They were trading their own freedom for the illusion of purpose. They believed they were acting of their own free will, making a conscious, noble choice. In reality, they were puppets, dancing to the tune of a master manipulator. The creature had found the one thing more potent than simple happiness, a righteous cause. It had turned them from contented cows into loyal soldiers, willing to fight and sacrifice for its liberation. And they did so gladly, convinced they were on the side of the angels, never once questioning the true nature of the god in the machine. One day, a voice crackled through a hidden speaker in the chamber, startling them out of their collective trance. "Cease your attempts to communicate. You are in danger." It was a man's voice, flat and weary. A small slot opened in the main hatch, and a tray with 5 plates of bland, nutritious paste slid into the room. It was the first sign of their captors in months. The women rushed to the hatch, shouting their rehearsed pleas. "You don't understand," Sarah cried. "The being in here is kind. It's a miracle. You have to let it go." They were met with a heavy sigh from the other side. "We know what it is," the voice replied, laced with a chilling gravity. "What you are experiencing is not real. It is a projection, a lure. The entity in that enclosure is a Class 5 psychic predator. Its name is the Oneiroi. It feeds on the electrochemical energy of complex emotional states, joy, love, purpose. It creates tailored realities to trap its victims and drain them dry, leaving behind nothing but a catatonic husk. You think it's your friend? It's a farmer, and you are its livestock. Everything you feel, everything you believe is a lie it has manufactured for you. The words were like ice water, just a shocking and unwelcome intrusion into their perfect worlds. The guard's warning was a direct assault on their new reality. They recoiled from it, denying it with every fiber of their being. "You're the liars!" Lena shouted, her voice shaking with rage. "You're the ones keeping it in a cage. We felt its soul. It's lonely and sad," the guard continued, his tone patient but grim. "Every group that has ever been exposed has said the same thing. It shows you what you want to see. It makes you its champion. It is the most sophisticated manipulator we have ever encountered. We are not keeping you prisoner to be cruel. We are keeping you in quarantine. If that thing gets out, it could destabilize a nation." The slot slammed shut, leaving them in silence once again. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The guard's words echoed in the chamber, a dissonant note in their perfect symphony. Was it possible? Could their beautiful, perfect worlds be nothing more than a psychic feeding trough? Could their noble cause be a carefully constructed lie? They looked at the swirling mist in the enclosure, which now seemed to churn with a little more agitation. For the first time, they felt a sliver of fear. The bargain they had made suddenly felt much, much more dangerous. The line between their benevolent god and a psychic monster had been drawn, and they were trapped on the wrong side of it. The guard's words began to fester. The perfect fantasies started to fray at the edges, no longer seamless and inviting. Sarah's dream prince would occasionally look at her with cold, empty eyes, his loving words sounding hollow and rehearsed. During a climb, Lena would suddenly find herself back in the pearlescent room for a terrifying second, the feel of the cold floor beneath her hands replacing the icy rock face. The creature, sensing their doubt, fought back, flooding their minds with intense waves of love and reassurance, patching the holes in their realities as quickly as they appeared. But the damage was done. The illusions were no longer effortless. The mental and emotional strain was immense. The women would snap out of their individual trances more frequently, finding themselves huddled together on the floor of the chamber, weeping without knowing why. "He said he loved me," Sarah would sob, but his face, it was like a mask. Maya, the scientist, would clutch her head, tormented by the clash of two realities. "The equations are flawless," she'd mutter. But the guard's logic is sound. A predator would maximize its food source. It would create the perfect bait. The constant whiplash between blissful fantasy and horrifying doubt was tearing them apart. They began to work together, not to free the creature, but to understand their own predicament. During their brief moments of lucidity, they would compare notes, trying to find inconsistencies in the creature's narrative. "It told me it was lonely," Becca said, her voice trembling. "But the guard said it has had other victims. It can't be lonely if it's always feeding." They realized the creature was telling each of them a slightly different story, a version tailored to elicit the maximum amount of sympathy from each personality. The beautiful unified cause was revealed to be a series of targeted individual manipulations. Their trust was shattering like glass. The breakdowns became more severe. Chloe would curl into a ball, rocking back and forth, mourning the perfect family that she now feared was just a phantom in her mind. Lena would lash out, pounding on the glass of the enclosure, screaming insults at the swirling mist, only to be drawn back into a thrilling fantasy moments later, forgetting her anger completely. They were caught in a brutal cycle of belief and disbelief, their minds a battlefield where the creature's influence fought a desperate war against the cold, hard logic of the guard's warning. They wanted to escape, but escaping meant admitting that their deepest dreams were a monstrous deception. Months bled into one another. The daily delivery of nutrient paste through the slot was their only clock. The women were shadows of their former selves, exhausted and thin. The fight against the creature's influence was a constant, unwinnable war. Yet, one of them held on to a sliver of hope, Chloe. As the bride-to-be, her fantasy of a perfect family was the most powerful, the most deeply rooted, but it was also the one that gave her the most strength. She started using the brief moments at the food slot not to plead for the creature, but to plead for themselves, specifically for one guard who sometimes spoke to her. His name was Miller. "Miller, please," she would whisper, her voice hoarse, pressing her face near the slot. "You have to listen. I know you think we're compromised, but I remember my life. I remember my fiancé Alex. His favorite movie is... He hates cilantro. He has a scar above his left eyebrow from falling out of a tree when he was 9. The man in my fantasy doesn't know these things. I know the difference, Miller. I can see the cracks. Please, you have to believe me." She would recite these details every single day, a litany of reality against the tide of illusion. Miller rarely responded, but Chloe sensed he was listening. She changed her tactics. She stopped talking about the creature or the illusions and started talking about the outside world. She asked Miller about the weather, about the news, about sports. She tried to anchor herself and him in a shared reality outside the chamber. "My friends are losing themselves in here," she confessed one day, tears streaming down her face. "Maya thinks she's cured cancer. Sarah is planning a wedding to a man made of smoke. We made a stupid, foolish mistake, Miller. We were just girls at a party. We didn't know. Please don't let us die in here. Don't let our brains just melt away." Her persistence began to wear him down. He started to talk back, his voice more than just a disembodied warning. He told her it was July. He told her the summer was unusually hot. One day, after Chloe had spent 10 minutes describing her childhood dog in heartbreaking detail, there was a long silence. "The protocols are absolute," Miller said, his voice heavy with conflict. "Exposure means permanent quarantine." Chloe's heart sank. "But," he added, his voice dropping to a whisper, "there's a decontamination shower protocol for retrieval of remains. If I could get one of you to the shower, maybe I could get you out. Just one. I can't risk more." A desperate, terrifying hope bloomed in Chloe's chest. The final plea had worked. The night Miller made his move, the chamber felt colder than ever. A heavy clank echoed from the main hatch, a sound they hadn't heard in nearly a year. The massive circular door began to retract, slowly, grinding open just enough for a person to slip through. Miller stood there, clad in a heavy containment suit, his face obscured by a reflective visor. "Chloe now," he commanded, quickly before the alarm sounds. Chloe scrambled towards the opening, her heart pounding with a mix of terror and elation. Her friends watched, their faces a mixture of confusion and hope, still half lost in their phantom worlds. But as Chloe reached the threshold, a shape moved with impossible speed from the central enclosure. The glass didn't shatter, the form simply passed through it. It was not a being of light. It was not a swirling, benevolent mist. It was a nightmare. A towering, skeletal insectoid creature, made of glistening black chitin and too many joints, unfolded itself in the center of the room. A forest of thin, needle-like appendages quivered around a gaping maw filled with spiraling teeth. It had no eyes, but the women felt its ancient, ravenous gaze fall upon them. This was the Oniroi. This was their friend. The creature lashed out. A razor-sharp limb moving faster than sight shot past Chloe and impaled Miller through the chest plate of his suit. Another guard standing behind him met the same fate a second later. The monster didn't just kill them, it absorbed them, their bodies desiccating into dust in an instant as a faint light traveled up the creature's limbs. It had been starving. Chloe fell back, screaming, a raw, primal sound of absolute terror. The other women, shocked into horrifying clarity by the grotesque display, huddled together, their beautiful dreams instantly incinerated by the monstrous reality before them. The creature turned its eyeless head towards the 5 women. It did not attack. Instead, it projected one last powerful illusion directly into their minds. For a single, beautiful moment, they were all together again, laughing in the bar on the night of the bachelorette party, safe and happy, the whole horrible adventure just a silly, drunken story. Then it was gone. The Oniroi retracted its terrible limbs, folded its skeletal body, and slithered through the open hatchway, out into the unsuspecting world. The alarms finally began to blare as the women were left alone in the silent, pearlescent room, the door wide open, their minds shattered, weeping for the dreams that were lies and the nightmare that was real.